Oh, I got a comment last time. They like the fact that we start the show before they actually see the countdown. So that's always fun. All right, let's get started. All right, welcome everybody to another exciting episode of Under the Dome. I'm your host, Alan Ulrich, here with Bob Rose. Um, Super Bowl Sunday. A lot of people enjoyed the game. Some people were angry at the game. Um, I enjoyed the game, but you know what? I did not enjoy the lack of defense in this game. It was last man with the ball wins, and I don't know if that's not a great Super Bowl for me. It was enjoyable because of a lot of big plays, but last man with the ball is not always a good game. Um, how did you feel about the game?
Uh, I mean, it was an entertaining game. I agree with you. I cannot say it was a good game. Yeah, because like you said, yeah, the lack of fundamentals and lack of defense. Um, it was tough to watch. But we're talking a different era of football now. So I'm not even going to call it the Super Bowl anymore. From here on out, I'm going to call it the Goodell Bowl. And I'll even do my research and look back, the last few seasons, and be try to surmise when the Super Bowl became the Goodell Bowl. I know the easy selection is the no call year, when the Rams were gifted the Super Bowl against the Patriots. But I'm sure it goes back before that. But I mean, anyhow, I thought both offenses played very well. I expected both offenses to play well, but I had picked Philadelphia all week because Philadelphia had the vastly superior defense all year long, and
Mm-hmm.
we really didn't see that. The defensive holding penalty on the last drive of the game. I mean, it literally gifted the Chiefs the game. You could say what you. I mean, to the letter of the law. Yeah, I suppose. It was illegal contact. But for an officiating crew that I actually thought had done a relatively decent job all game long, uh, and letting the players play to make that call right then, it didn't surprise me given today's day and age of NFL. But it was very frustrating. If you're trying to watch a good game and hoping for a clean end. But if you're a football fan these days, you very, very rarely get a clean end to any game. And I'll leave it at that. I mean, but both teams play good, hard football. You just would have liked to see a cleaner game on the defensive side.
I was just, it was really amazing to me how, I don't know, the fourth and one plays that consistently, and fourth and two plays that consistently they got with quarterback sneaks. Um, I know the Chiefs' defense isn't nearly as good as Philadelphia's defense, but I would have expected at least one of those plays to get stopped. And too often, guys just got in the end zone without anybody even touching them. Um, yeah, the thing about that holding call was, yes, it was a hold. I thought it was a more egregious hold early in the second quarter that ended a Chiefs drive. And it just, here's the thing. So, like, to get myself ready to watch the Super Bowl, I used to end up watching Super Bowl highlight films, NFL
Yeah.
films. And thanks to YouTube, they now actually put the whole games on. I was able to find a lot of them. So, I watched Super Bowl five, I watched Super Bowl six, I watched seven, eight. Eight's in pieces. They used to be the whole game, but it's now in pieces. Nine, 10. 10's the one where Pat Summerall and Tom Brookshire are still hungover and somewhat a little bit drunk during the broadcast, and they make jokes about it during the broadcast. Super Bowl 11 with the Steelers, with the Raiders and the Vikings. 12, 13, 14, 15 can't be found. 16's on there. That's the 49ers and the Bengals.
Yeah.
17 I watched. 18 I watched, and then it just kind of pitters out after that. I watched 25. In fact, Super Bowl Sunday, Giants Bills game, and it's just, I think the league got tired of the super blowouts of the 80s, and they started to officiate the game differently in there, because if you notice after 2000, 1999 is probably the first one of the close endings, because it went down to the final play of the game. The 1 yard short play. But after those Super Bowls, it's like they decided, you know what? Fans enjoy lots of offense because everybody's got betting pools going on. They enjoy high scoring games. They enjoy games that come down to the last second. So it's almost like they call the game so it turns out that way.
Mm-hmm.
Always to keep it close game. Comebacks. There weren't many comebacks in the Super Bowl. There's only been 3, really, if you think about it. And the Saints are one of them. The Falcons and the Eagles are the only 2 teams in Super Bowl history. We're talking about 57 Super Bowls. The only 2 teams that ever had a 10-point or larger lead at halftime and lost. Whereas you think about, what was it, Super Bowl, the one in 87, I think it's Super Bowl 22, where the Redskins scored 35 points in the second quarter. There was no coming back for the Broncos in that game. Sorry to bring up bad memories. But I think in today's game, the Redskins offense probably would have gotten flagged for holding a bunch. And the Broncos would have been allowed to come back.
Mm-hmm.
They may not have won the game, but it's like when you play Madden and you're playing the computer, and then it goes into bullshit mode where you can't run a play and the computer can just do anything it wants. You turn the ball over, they're completing passes, your defense can't stop anybody. And it's like, that's how the game is called today. And it is frustrating. It is very frustrating because it kind of ruins the feel of these games. I don't need to see a 14-7 or 17-7 kind of game, but I do like to see some defense, and just the fact that there was hardly any punting in the game. Just really, I don't know. I'd like to see a good defensive stop just as much as I enjoy seeing, a nice drive, an important drive in the game. In this game, it's like, what was the important drive? The final drive for the Chiefs, and probably the second to last drive the Eagles had. Those are probably the most critical drives. Because the rest of it is just like, okay, they're coming back. They're coming back. So I don't know. Is that kind of how you feel? Is my volume that bad? You got to be that close to hear me.
Yeah, that's absolutely the way I feel. And folks, I apologize when Alan's talking. I'm having a hard time with audio on my end. So when Alan talks, I got to lean up to hear what he has to say. So you guys are going to get a close up of my ears or nose or forehead or whatever. Yeah, however I'm sitting. But yeah, the old saying about the NBA that you didn't need to watch an NBA game until the final 2 minutes. You're beginning to feel that way about Goodell football. That you don't really need to tune into an NFL game until the final 8 minutes. because because a lot of what you said, that the referee, depending on what teams are playing, of course, and I'll leave that to the imagination, but officiating or whatever conspiracy you want to plug in there, will keep especially an important game or a big game close until those final 8 or 10 minutes. And that's very much the feel that I get in today's NFL, especially in big games, even in the championship game. And the way I look at it is this: these are the best two teams, in theory. These are the best two teams in the National Football League. Let them play. Let them play. And when I'm not going to call Philadelphia a defensive-oriented team, because unlike other defensive-oriented teams like New Orleans or the Ravens this year, Philadelphia had an explosive offense too. But I made a comment. I watched the first half of the game at my parents' house, and I made a comment to them at some point. I forget what happened. But I go, if our son Will plays football, I hope he's a better offensive player than a defensive player, because defensive players in today's NFL, because of the way that they want the game played, defensive players are absolutely helpless, to literally do anything. And on both sides, I mean, Kansas City has some very talented defensive players too, but Philadelphia. If it weren't for San Francisco's defense this year, then Philadelphia would have had the top NFL defense, hands down. New Orleans had a very good defense. There were a few others out there, but Philadelphia and San Francisco were the best two defenses in the NFL. But you wouldn't have known it. They couldn't touch Mahomes. Part of that is due to credit to the Kansas City offensive line. But still, when his team comes into a championship game with 70 sacks and can't even sniff a pressure, something's going on. And we continue to see it throughout the league, week after week, year after year now. Regardless of how good a secondary is, defensive backfield is, regardless of how good defensive coverage is, you can literally count on flags being thrown at the most crucial times. And I don't know about you. Well, I do know about you, Alan, because I know you well. I don't know about you guys. Goodell ball has taken literally all the enjoyment out of a game, even when you're watching your favorite team, because every single play, before you even celebrate, you have to pause yourself and look at the corner of the TV screen to see if there's a flag. And even then, you hesitantly celebrate, because mostly when certain teams or certain players are playing, you might get a flag 2 minutes later when the teams are starting to go back to the huddles. Yeah. It's an absolutely ridiculous game to watch now.
I completely agree. I feel like that they time the flags, and like I said, I always called it keep it close flags that they throw. But I feel like they do a lot of things to shape the game. I mean, we talk a lot about there have been jokes about the NFL being scripted. I don't believe it's not scripted, because there's too many things, too many variables.
Yeah, manipulated, but not scripted.
Yeah, they know there are things they can do within the game to affect the outcome, and penalties are the easiest one, because we keep passing rules, and I say we as the league keep passing rules that are more and more judgment calls, as opposed to, okay, is that a catch, inbounds, out of bounds? Mm-hmm. That kind of stuff that's very obvious on film. Is that a hold? Is that offsides? What is it? And that's what happens in these games, that they throw judgment call flags, like you said, at certain points in the game that determine the outcome. Because this game either goes to overtime or the Eagles win if they don't get that last flag at the end of the game. Mm-hmm. And I don't think they wanted an overtime. I think they wanted this game to end at a certain time. It was 9 o'clock. It's like, let's wrap it up. It's time to go. So it's that's what was frustrating for me watching him. That took a lot of the enjoyment out of the game for me. The lack of defense, the rules being shaped to prevent good defense, especially when you watch old games. Okay, and then the critical flags at late in the game. That just kind of sucks all the joy out of me. And I think there's so much more. I don't know what's the right word. It's more of a production now than a game. Like
Yes.
the game is secondary. Um, I'm not going to go on about the halftime show because I mean that's not my music. That's my kids' era music. So that I'm not going to go there. But the national anthem, the pregame, the coin toss, it's like everything is a big production. And then the game comes on and it's like they're just waiting because the commercials and just they kept hyping the halftime show, I'm like, there's a game happening here. Most of us are watching the game. This isn't the era of the super blowout, so we're not bored looking forward to something else. We're watching the game itself, but you're hyping all these next things in that announcer, the stadium announcer. First down, first down, Chiefs. I'm going, come on, man. It's just way over the top. I want get back to the essence of the game itself. Because the other stuff just bores me. It really does. Because I'll be honest with you, I haven't watched the halftime show
No.
in see, I watched the Who, but I wasn't really watching it because I was at some place where I was watching I was at my parents' house watching the game, so it was on. But I haven't watched a halftime show, God, in a good 30 to 40 years. I really haven't. I mean, I remember Prince. I remember Michael Jackson. I remember Diana Ross. I don't remember Aerosmith at all.
No.
But I remember those guys. But I don't really remember anything about the show. I just it was on. I wasn't listening, that I was doing other things during that. So, so Rihanna coming up isn't what I'm looking forward to. I'm looking forward to the next play. That's what I'm
Mm-hmm.
going. All that said, did Tubi get you?
Do what?
Did the Tubi commercial get you?
No.
It got me. I have to admit, it got me. And I'm in the room by myself watching it. And I went, what the hell? I'm looking around like, did my TV just get hacked? What the hell? Because it was a very well done commercial. I got to give them that one.
Yeah, it was in hindsight. I tell you, the only reason it didn't get me is because I was only like half paying attention, because the game really hadn't started yet. So I was just, it kind of settling into football watching mode. And I didn't realize what had happened until after it was already gone. And then I was like, wait a minute, was that a glitch? And I just went on with my life.
Well, the funny thing is, I do have Tubi on my TV, and I haven't subscribed to Tubi, but I have the app on my TV screen. So it was very realistic, and somebody could get on there and start changing it like that. And so on YouTube, they've got like the Tubi commercial reactions, and this one dad is a typical dad. He's standing, goes, "Hey!" and it's just screaming at his kids. Everybody stand up. Where's the remote? The dog starts barking and stuff like that. So it was very amusing to me to see the reactions people had because it was really well done. It starts off with the two guys And I have to say, Fox did a great job calling this game
Yes.
as opposed to when you had Aikman and Buck. Um, I thought they both did a great job being understated, stating what was going on in the game, not overly speculating, not overhyping a single play, just really just going at it. And Greg Olson's thing was, well, for the Eagles, third down is second down, so it's always going to be, they're going to go for it on fourth down every time. So you have to defend them that way. And I thought they did a great job. I mean, how did you feel about that? Bob, you took your
Yeah,
face
I'm
off.
still here. I
Okay.
turned my camera off so I can hold you like a phone and actually hear you.
Okay. All right. Yeah, it's got to be a speaker.
It
Um,
is. It is. I had a recent phone update, not recent, but happened towards the end of the regular season where we started having audio. I started having audio problems on my show, Bayou Blitz on Wednesday nights. More often than not, you come through all right weekly, and I don't know what the problem is today. Obviously backslid.
I wonder if headphones will help you out. You just plug headphones into your phone. You might
Probably,
get.
but the setup on my phone, the different headphones that I have, the jacks won't fit in into the port. So I don't know what I'm going to do.
Um, okay, so I guess the next question is, now that the Super Bowl is over with, the off season has officially begun. Now this league year hasn't started yet, but now that we're into the off season, um, obviously Derek Carr. We talked a little bit about him last week.
Hmm.
Um, he came out the Super Bowl Sunday and basically said, "I'm not going to waive my no trade clause." The Chief and the Raiders did end up cutting him. So, what do you think happens now with Derek Carr?
First of all, Saints fans, just because
Uh-huh.
Derek Carr announced over the weekend, like Alan said, that he wasn't going to waive his no trade clause, that didn't mean that he didn't like the Saints. As a matter of fact, just the opposite. I mean, he was only supposed to meet with the team one day. It turned into 2 days. He has a well documented close relationship with Dennis Allen, who originally drafted him, if you remember. Uh, the reason why Derek Carr would not waive his no trade clause was because the Saints were the only team that showed any interest in making a trade for him. For Derek Carr, this is a purely financial situation. He wants to control, and as a player, he has this right. He wants to control where he goes, and if there's only one team that's interested in trading for him, he can't do that. Meanwhile, I'm fairly certain that the finances were also a sticking point for the Raiders, who probably did not want to pick up the bulk of his remaining contract, as the Saints, who are in a salary cap hole, would have probably demanded. So, by releasing Derek Carr, the Raiders will still take a cap hit, but it won't be nearly as big. And now Carr can negotiate with other teams. And there are going to be several teams that he's going to visit with, probably a couple of them more than once. The New Orleans Saints are going to be one of those teams. So the Saints are by no stretch out of this whatsoever. But if you're if you're rooting for Derek Carr to be a New Orleans Saint, watch things happen very closely. The more teams that get involved, especially once teams with salary cap space get involved, that moves the Saints down the pecking order, because New Orleans cannot afford to get into a bidding war for Derek Carr. They just can't, no matter how bad they want him. They're not going to be able to. So it's one thing if a lot of teams get involved and visit with him, but when this starts to get to the point where it's multiple visits with multiple teams, that's when we need to start getting worried. As of right now, I think the New Orleans Saints are still the front runner to sign Derek Carr, but this process has got probably another 4 to 5 weeks to play itself out.
Hmm. Um, well, so you had a story come out today. and this is
Hmm.
this is what I warn people about when they say I don't want Derek Carr on this team. Um, the next name that came up on the list is Baker Mayfield,
Hmm.
and you have a story out today that the Saints may be interested in Baker Mayfield. You think Mayfield is Plan B? Where do you think where do you think they go from here um, if Carr doesn't choose the Saints?
I think Mayfield is a plan B. Yeah, now that the Saints have shown legitimate interest in Derek Carr, I would have to think that they would have a similar kind of interest in Jimmy Garoppolo. The two players have bring similar resumes, similar successes, and in my opinion, both would be good fits in New Orleans system. You have to consider Derek Carr and Jimmy Garoppolo the two best quarterbacks that are going to be available on the free agent market. Uh, Geno Smith, Daniel Jones are probably going to be available too, depending on what the Seahawks and Giants decide to do with those guys. They could franchise tag either or both of them. A guy like Baker Mayfield uh, would definitely be a plan B. Um, I actually have a list of Plan B guys that the Saints could be interested in: Baker Mayfield, Teddy Bridgewater, Andy Dalton, Jacoby Brissett, Sam Darnold, and yes, folks, Matt Ryan. I am not saying any of those guys are a good solution whatsoever. And I'm not sitting here telling you that the Saints are going to be interested in all of those guys, but they're legitimate Plan B options, and this is the reason why. All of them have had veteran starting experience in the NFL. And here's the thing: if the Saints go after and get Derek Carr or Jimmy Garoppolo, or let's even stretch and say Geno Smith or Daniel Jones, the financial resources they would have to tie up to get any of those guys. That's your answer at the quarterback position, or at least that's what the Saints think their answer is at the quarterback position. So anybody that wants the New Orleans Saints to draft a quarterback with their first round pick this year, it's simply not going to happen if they get any of those guys. If they go after a Mayfield or think they can keep a Dalton or bring in a Brissett, et cetera, all of those guys I would consider as bridge starters. So we'll use this. My article this morning, since it mentioned Baker Mayfield specifically, and that was information gotten directly from Albert Breer, a National Sports Illustrated reporter for years. There's no sources to any of this. It is just conjecture on both Albert's part, and then I took it an extra step in my own piece. This is just one of the quarterbacks that the Saints are probably going to show interest in. If something like this happens, you would see, I would think, a similar contract structure to what the Saints re-signed Jameis Winston to last year. It would be a 1 or a 2 year deal without a major hit on the Saints salary cap. The Saints would still be freed up to go after a quarterback in the first round if they choose to, knowing that that a guy like Mayfield could be a bridge starter. And hey, who knows? What happened with Geno Smith last year, a journeyman all of his career, and then all of a sudden has a career year and is about to cash in big in free agency. A guy like Mayfield, Sam Darnold, Jacoby Brissett, why couldn't that happen to them? Am I saying it's a good fit personally? No, but we write these articles because they have to be considered legitimate options. You have to take yourself out of the eyes of a pure fan and try to put yourself in the shoes of Mickey Loomis or Gail Benson. They're trying to fill the biggest need on the New Orleans Saints right now, and you can't put all your baskets in a Derek Carr or Jimmy Garoppolo because of the heavy interest that's going to be throughout the league. You have to have other options too. And the Saints, like it or not, folks, the Saints are going to meet with these guys.
Yeah, a lot of people, because we've had Breeze for such a long time, a lot of people don't remember what it was like after Abear, really, if you think about it, because that's where the quarterback carousel really got started.
Oh yeah.
It kind of calmed down once Abear was signed in '85, and then he was named the starter in '86. Now he got hurt, so you saw a lot of Dave Wilson, but he was pretty much the starter until '92. Um, but yeah, you when you sign Wade Wilson, okay, Wade Wilson is the equivalent of a lot of those names that you mentioned. He was a streaky guy. He came out hot. We went 5-0, and then the cold streak started, and he ended up 3-8 over the last 11 games. So that season went 8-8. So they went looking for another quarterback. They brought in Brett Favre. They brought in Bubby Brister. They had Bubby Brister pretty much signed to a contract. Brister just had to come and put his John Hancock on this thing. And then at the last minute, they made a trade for Jim Everett. Jim Everett comes. Everett is the starter for 3 years. Ditka comes in. Everett takes one look at Danny Abramowitz's playbook, starts laughing and says, I'm out. I'm out of here. You're going to try and run that offensive system in 1997, something that was invented in the 1960s. You're trying to do this now? It ain't going to work. It didn't work. He ended up going to San Diego. In fact, he beat the Saints when he went to San Diego. That was his last year in the league. And then the quarterback carousel, as everyone knows by heart, really went underway. Heath Schuler, Danny Werfel, Billy Joe Tolliver, Billy Joe Hobart, Kerry Rum Collins.
Rum Collins.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I used to call him, Kerry Rum Collins. Let me think. Who else did they have in there too? There was some. Jake Delhomme. How to get Jake? Billy Joe Hobart again. Billy Joe Tolliver. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Wasn't Doug Nussmeier in there?
Doug Nussmeier. Yeah. No, I don't think. I think Doug Nussmeier. No, he did play a game. He did play a game that year. I do remember that now. And I think Tommy Hodson even played one game.
Yep, I think you're right.
I could be wrong. That could be another year that Tommy Hodson played, because I do remember when Wade Wilson got hurt, we got our Mike Buck appearance, and the fans were all enthralled by Mike Buck because the one pass he did throw was in '91 when Steve Young faked a ring finger injury. Went to not Steve Young, Steve Walsh. Sorry, big difference. Steve Walsh against the Falcons on Sunday Night Football faked a ring finger injury. Goes to the sideline. Buck comes in with a helmet and chin strap. Didn't even fit him. You see it hanging there, and he takes a snap and just cocks his arm back and throws the ball like 60 yards in the air to I think it was Quinn Early. But anyway, it gets the big bomb. Fans go nuts, and then Steve Young Steve Walsh, is magically healed, goes back out there, hands the ball off, they score a touchdown. But everybody thought, that Mike Buck was like going to be the answer. He didn't even last a half. He was that bad. He was somebody who had all the physical skills, but was dumb as a post. So I mean, football wise, dumb as a post. He was just. It was always funny because that's when you really learned about how fans felt about the backup quarterback, because it's like, this is the guy who needs to play now. Oh shit, he can't play. Then this guy's got to play. Oh shit, he can't play either. How about this guy? No, he's terrible too. So yeah, we got that in the '90s. Whew, man, a trip down bad memory lane. But my point, the reason why I bring all that up, is because this is what you're going to end up with now that you don't have a franchise quarterback. So you knock a Derek Carr, and in my view, Derek Carr can be a Bobby Hebert, even Bob, don't take this the wrong way, because Jim Everett's a friend of the show, but a Jim Everett kind of guy. Not a great quarterback, but somebody, if you have the pieces around him, can at least not lose the game for you. And the same thing is true for a Jimmy Garoppolo. Now, when you start getting into the Baker Mayfields, when you start getting into the Sam Darnold and people like that, now you're talking about somebody who can lose a game for you despite everything else going right. And it's hard for me to get excited about this. So I guess my opinion is, so if we don't do any of those guys and we roll back with Andy Dalton again, where do you see the Saints going in the draft then? Because I still think they've got to solve the quarterback problem first, at least for a couple of seasons until they can figure out where the next franchise quarterback comes from. Where do you see the Saints going quarterback if they have to go quarterback in the draft?
We have to get the quarterback question answered. And yeah, if there's a silver lining to take out of this mess, it's we'll have a real quick answer early in free agency, which officially begins March 15th. But negotiating period starts March 13th. So we'll have a real quick answer as far as where Garoppolo is going to land, where Carr is going to land, for that matter, even Geno Smith or Daniel Jones, where they're going to land. And again, if New Orleans doesn't get any of those, like you just pointed out, they still need a quarterback to line up in 2023. And there's never any guarantee you're going to get one in the draft unless you have the number one overall pick. So you still have to bring in a guy. Maybe they bring back Andy Dalton. You and I both know that whether you feel Jameis Winston got a fair shake in New Orleans or not is irrelevant. As long Dennis Allen is back as coach, Jameis Winston will not be back as quarterback. It's as simple as that. So maybe they bring back Andy Dalton. Maybe they bring in Baker Mayfield. Maybe they bring in any of those other guys, Darnold, Brissett, whomever. But I agree, and I couldn't agree with you more. None of them have proven to be the answer anywhere they've been in their career. So there's no reason to believe that they'll do so now. Maybe they will, but you can't go into the season banking on that. You just bring them in as a warm body to take snaps. So that being said, you hold the 29th overall pick. I highly doubt that New Orleans has the ammunition to move up to get any of the big three in the draft this year. And the big three being, CJ Stroud, Bryce Young, Will Levis. Hell, I'll even put Anthony Richardson up there because he's going to be overdrafted. He's going to be a top 50. So I don't think New Orleans has the ammunition to move up to get any of those guys if you feel any of them are the answer. So what's that leave you with? Hendon Hooker from Tennessee, I'm a big fan of. I think he'll be there at 29, or if not 29, you should only have to move up a little ways to get him. Maybe they like a guy like Tanner McKee from Stanford, or the name escapes me. Aiden O'Connell from Purdue. There's going to be a couple other guys. The most likely, probably the fifth quarterback off the board this year. I think it's a pretty safe bet that it's going to be Hendon Hooker. And I gotta believe that New Orleans has that in the back of their mind, sitting at number 29, knowing that if he isn't going to be there at 29, they only have to move up a little way to get him. But even then, whether it's Hooker or any of the other rookie quarterbacks, you still need a veteran with experience. A, if your rookie isn't ready coming out of the preseason, or B, if your rookie has early struggles and you have to turn to a veteran and hope that you'll win some games. So they got, in my opinion, because of that, they have to bring in a veteran guy. Again, whether could be Mayfield, could be Dalton, could be Teddy. It doesn't matter. I mean, they're all the same once you throw those names into a hat to me.
What do you said the guy you had listed?
What's that?
You said you had Jaron Hall from BYU as one of the quarterbacks you had listed?
That's the guy I couldn't remember. Yeah, Jaron Hall is another one scouts are big on. the film I've seen him so far, yeah, he has a lot of physical tools, but he can't read a defense worth crap. He's real slow to process. But yeah, he'll be a name up there too. But again, the guy I like at that spot is Hendon Hooker.
I know a lot of people are into Hendon Hooker, and I like him too. I'll be honest with you. My only problem with him is he's 26 years old. That's why I think probably the second round pick is where you're probably going to be looking at him. I don't know if he'll fall all the way to the Saints. That's in the second, but that's where I think he more fits. It depends on how he is with the knee injury. If he's struggling to do pro days because of his knee injury, it probably is going to be a safer bet. But right now, I just don't see him at worth the 29th overall pick. Just because I don't know how much of a long-term future he has in the NFL. Being an older player, just to give you an idea, Jalen Hurts, who is now in his third year in the league, is 25. So, he's older than the quarterback who just played in the Super Bowl, who's in his third year in the league. And it took Hurts 3 years to get to this level. 2 years ago, Eagle fans were ready to throw him out the window. They didn't think he was going to be a long-term answer. That's the danger of a guy like Hooker. I agree with you. Anthony Richardson is going to be over. I really think that he's raw, and someone's going to reach for him because he's a guy who definitely needs gear. So why I'm looking at other guys that could be in the second round available. So you still would have Levis as one of the top three, right?
I would, yeah. And yeah, going back to what you said about Hooker, I get the concerns, but I look at it this way with Hooker. Yeah, first of all, unlike a lot of quarterbacks that have come into the draft recently, he actually has more than 1 year of starting experience, and that's big with me. Second, he is 25. He'll be 26, like you pointed out, before the season starts. But the way, we're seeing quarterbacks play into their late 30s. A couple of them even reaching the 40-year-old mark. If you told me that you were going to get a Hendon Hooker play well until he's 37, 38 years old, that's 12 seasons that you get from an NFL quarterback. And if it's at a high level, I think most Saints fans would take 12 years of good quarterback play at this point. And by the tone of your voice, I surmise you think the same thing. I don't put a lot of stock into the ACL injury because the medical field is so remarkable now. Remember that Jameis Winston blew out his knee in an ugly injury on Halloween and was ready for the season opener the following year. So the biggest thing was with Hooker, no doubt. It is the age. But again, if you can get 10, 12, 14 years out of him into his late 30s, I think most Saints fans would take that in a heartbeat over what they have right now.
So let me throw this one out then at you, because I know Calvin's asking this question too. Tanner McKee, where do you see him going?
I see Tanner probably he'll be a day 2 pick. At least as it stands right now, unless he wows people with his athleticism at the combine, because that's the biggest thing with him right now. A lot of scouts don't view him as a two-way threat. He's a pure pocket passer. Big, tall, strong guy, but can't move real well and can't make plays on the run. So you have to have a good offensive line. And in today's NFL, even that's not a given. Considering how defenses pressure and how quarterbacks are expected to make plays on the move. But as far as his pocket presence, his mechanics, his arm strength, I like all. He checks off all those boxes. So if you get a Tanner McKee, maybe late second round, early to midway through the third, you could be getting yourself a good quarterback.
Yeah. My son has an opinion, and so does Calvin. It's one of those things and this is the issue that you run into. So where do you go with a quarterback if you don't get Carr, you don't get a Garoppolo? Where do you go? So you're not going to get Stroud, you're not going to get Young. You're going to end up having to go get one of these guys that have negatives or have dings against them, like a Hooker, like a McKee, or a Richardson. You're going after potential more so than you're going after a sure thing. And do fans have the patience to go after somebody like that? I don't know. I don't know because I don't see that patience right now. I think people will just feel like anybody that comes in, unless they start winning right away, it's like, yeah, they got to go. Same with the coach. Everybody's got to go, or the whole tank for Caleb Williams, which is not realistic because you've got too much talent to tank, I don't know. So you're in that limbo land, roll with somebody or, a veteran guy. And yeah, you may only get to the first round of the playoffs, like Calvin wrote, 3 years of mediocrity and then first round blowout exit, which I don't know if that'll happen. But where do you go from there? Because you're not going to, you've got too much talent to get in that top 10, that top 5. I don't know.
Yeah, that's exactly it, and that's the problem with the Saints right now. And you can't. I hate to use the word tank, and I know you do too. But you can't go into the following season with the status quo. You can't bring a guy like Andy Dalton back and not roll the dice on a rookie quarterback. You can't bring in a guy like Baker Mayfield or a guy like Teddy Bridgewater and not go after a rookie quarterback. Because here's the thing, forget the fan base for a minute, because a large portion of them has already given up on 2023. It's mind-boggling to me right now. You have players, established stars like Demario Davis, Cam Jordan, Marshawn Lattimore, Alvin Kamara, the list. Established stars where the end of their career is closer than the beginning. What kind of message does that send to them if you bring a guy like Dalton, Mayfield, Bridgewater in and don't go after a rookie quarterback, whether you feel it's a roll of the dice or not? To me, you could lose the locker room really quick if you do something like that, because it doesn't show any kind of commitment to winning. And say what you will about the Saints and their personnel moves the last few years, all of those moves have been directed towards winning. They haven't always panned out, but that's where they've been focused.
And that's where I was going to go with this. Like I was telling people who were upset about the Saints possibly trading for Carr, there's nothing that says if you bring in a Carr or you bring in a Garoppolo that you can't go and draft somebody and let this guy battle it out. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, you bring in Carr, okay, since Carr is the name we've been talking about. You bring in Carr. There's no reason you can't go in and you see a guy like Anthony Richardson falling, okay? And he's falling to you. He's gone completely out of the first round. Hell, he's gone completely out of the second round. And I know there's some people, Anthony Richardson fans, are screaming, "There's no way that's going to happen," and pure rage. But you don't know, because how we view players is not the way they view in these draft rooms.
Nope.
There's a reason why. Jalen Hurts went in the second round. Okay. Um, Joe Montana went in the third round. Tom Brady, as everybody knows, went in the sixth round. Um, there's a reason why guys fall for whatever. Drew Brees went in the second round.
Yep.
Um, there's a reason why guys fall because they've got those dings, and people start grading these players and decide, you know what, I don't have the patience to wait for this guy to develop, so I'm not taking him. Or I don't like the way he came off in an interview. I don't like whatever the coaches said. His high school English teacher gave him a bad review. Who knows what it is? But there's a reason why guys tumble. So when a guy tumbles to you, and Alvin Kamara went in the third round. I know we're talking quarterbacks, but Alvin Kamara went in the third round. Forget that. So Cam Jordan didn't get drafted till the end of the first round. There's a reason why people slide for whatever. So there's nothing that prevents us from drafting a quarterback as well as signing a quarterback. So you got all kinds of things that you got playing in the thing, and you're going to take a gamble and say, okay, I can draft this guy here. Let him sit on my bench for a couple years and try and develop him. And if he turns out to be a bust, I move on. I go get someone else. That's why I'm not upset about Garrett Grayson. I'm not upset about Sean Canfield because you took a shot at a guy. I'm not upset about Ian Book. You took a shot on a guy. Yeah, a lot of fans like he sucked. There was no reason to draft him in the first place. Okay, you're right. But we took a shot on him to see what we can do with him. So it's those are the kind of things that are up there. So
I'll agree with that to a certain point. And especially with what you said about Canfield, Grayson, Book. As you pointed out, everybody knows that Tom Brady was drafted in the 7th round. Dak Prescott was drafted in the 4th round. Brock Purdy was a 7th round pick. And we can go on and on. Breeze in the 2nd round. Garoppolo, I believe, was a 3rd round pick. Carr was a 2nd round pick. All those things. So I agree with you. If you bring in, say you do get a guy like Carr or Garoppolo, I don't think it should prevent you from drafting a quarterback if one falls to you that you like in the 2nd or 3rd round. But I don't think if you get a Carr or Garoppolo, I don't think the Saints will then draft one with their 1st round pick. And here's why. You bring in a Carr, Garoppolo, and and I could be wrong, but at least as it stands right now, you're gonna have finances tied up in these guys. A 4-year contract, probably averaging around $30 million a year or so. That's some heavy money to pay out, and unless you structure it where you can get you have an easy out if they play poorly after the first year or two, you're stuck with these guys. And there's too many holes on this team to get stuck with a quarterback that you're paying a lot of money to and still have a 1st round quarterback on the bench. You see what I'm saying? And this is just the way that I see it. And that's why I said before, that if they have to bring in a guy like Mayfield, Dalton, Darnold, et cetera, whomever, at that point, I still think they go after a quarterback in the 1st, but I don't think they do so if they end up with a Carr or Garoppolo.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with that. That's why I was saying a 2nd or 3rd round pick.
Right.
Because you're not going to get the 1st rounder. They're just not going to burn a 1st rounder on a quarterback. And the Saints absolutely will not go into this draft class needing to draft a quarterback. They just won't do it. That is not how they operate. They will go in and go get fill the roster with the players that create players they think can carry them over in case the draft doesn't work out the way they want it to. but they always go after who they feel are the best available players in the draft, regardless of position. Um, and
Yeah,
that's just
exactly, and that goes back to the point that both of us made earlier tonight. With if there's a silver lining to take out of this, we're going to know something about the quarterback position for the New Orleans Saints very early in free agency, because they're going to bring, if they don't get a Carr or Garoppolo, they're going to bring in somebody, because like you said, they're not going to go into the draft without a quarterback at all, saying, well, we have to take whatever quarterback is there on the board. They've always stayed true to their draft board, who they like and where they like them, and I don't expect that to change.
right. And Ryan's on right now, and he says, if we sign Carr, we're not going to have enough cap to re-sign some veterans or guys like Caden Ellis. I disagree with that, only because the Saints are going to structure that contract where they push all the big money cap hit wise to the back of the contract. They're not going to let the salary cap prevent them from signing somebody. That's just the way they operate. They will manipulate contracts. The player will get a lot of money up front, and they'll just push all the cap hit back end. That's what happens. They're not going to let something like that happen. If they want Caden Ellis, they're going to make a way to get Caden Ellis. They weren't going to pay Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. They weren't going to pay Marcus Williams. That was just decisions that the staff had made, the front office made. They don't lose players because they can't afford to pay them. They make choices that they're not going to pay certain guys. That's all they do. So I wouldn't worry about the cap portion. Davenport. I know a lot of people get upset about Davenport because he costs 2 first-round picks. I feel that the bigger bust is Peyton Turner. Peyton Turner wasn't even graded as a first-round pick. I felt they reached for him, and he's turned out to be a third-round kind of guy. I don't like that pick at all. I still don't like that pick.
No, I didn't at the time either. Now, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. I think we all assume that Davenport isn't going to be back because of the money that he's going to want on the open market and get on the open market. But remember, Cesar Ruiz, that light didn't come on for Ruiz until year 3 either, and Peyton Turner is now coming into year 3. I agree with you. I didn't like the pick at the time. I especially don't like it now because the man just hasn't been on the field enough.
Right.
But he's going to get, assuming Davenport is gone and they're not going to spend big money to bring in another defensive end, Peyton Turner is going to get his chances this year. Based off what we've seen so far, there's nothing to get overly excited for. But remember, people wanted to lynch Cesar Ruiz a year ago at this time, and I'm including myself in people.
Yeah, well, KCR said, he forgot Peyton Turner was even on the team. Yeah, because he was a healthy scratch a couple times. So
right.
That's really that is more than anything else. That really condemns him because now he's getting beaten out by Carl Granderson. Undrafted free agents. That's unacceptable. Your first round pick can't even beat out an undrafted guy. And I wouldn't say he's the biggest bust. I certainly wouldn't say Davenport is. There are guys I could run down the list of some players that are worse than those guys. And unfortunately, a lot of them are defensive linemen. If you think about it, I mean, you look at Jonathan Sullivan. Oh my God. Yep. The only thing he's famous for is him and Grady Jackson busted in the media room and attacked the buffet and pigged out on the buffet on games, a home game they weren't even active for. And then, you go back to 1987, Saints, 87 season. The Saints finally had their first winning season, get to the postseason. They get blown out by the Vikings. So what do the Saints do? They draft a big defensive tackle out of BYU.
Yep, Sean Knight.
Biggest bust probably since Benson bought the team, in '85. Biggest bust ever. Never played a down or played, never started a game, I should say. Never started a game, played a few downs. They traded him to the Broncos for another first round bust, Ted Gregory, and
Mm-hmm.
both were out within a year or so.
Yep.
So, yeah, Turner is playing better than Jonathan Sullivan.
You could point out a guy like Stephen Anthony, who I thought was going to be a monster and had all the physical abilities in the world, but yeah, can't decipher a football for dummies 101 book.
No. It's funny because you know who one of the Eagles' top sack men were, right? A guy you and I argued about a lot that year. He was coming out of the draft.
I was joking with Lauren about that. She actually remember, you frustrated the hell out of me that year. I'm like, this Allen won't listen to me.
Because they're playing him exactly the way I felt like they had to play him, that the Saints weren't going to play him as a hybrid defensive end outside linebacker. And, as long as the Saints were going to be a 4-3 defense, I just felt like he was never going to blossom with the Saints, that he was an ideal 34 defensive guy. And sure enough, that's where he's working.
And even though the Eagles list their defense at a base 4-3, you're right. I mean, and I agreed with you at the time. Hassan Reddick is not a guy you want to drop into coverage. I believe the argument I kept falling back to was if they use him like Denver used Von Miller, and Von was used in a listed base 4-3 scheme, but he was always used to rush the passer. And Reddick really struggled his first 2 years in Arizona because they drop him into coverage. It wasn't until they started using him exactly how both you and I thought he would be, it should be used. And that's when that light turned on for him.
KCR, and I hope I'm saying your name right, listed Cedric Ellis as a bust too. And I wouldn't say Cedric Ellis was a bust because he did play well enough for a first round pick, but I would put him in and I'm going back in time to Jim Moore era, but I would put him in the Ronaldo Turnbull category. He was a guy that football was not his passion. Something else was his passion. And he had the talent and he flashed that ability. In the first year that Ronaldo Turnbull took over for Pat Swilling, he led the Saints with sacks. I think he had 13 sacks that year, but was never that good ever again. They changed the defense twice to try and get him in a position to be a bigger player, but he was more interested in the stock market. Very athletic, very fast, but football just didn't drive him. Cedric Ellis was kind of the same way. He had that 1 year where he really looked good. Then he kind of tailed off. He signed with the Bears and then quit. It's funny, so it's hard because so many of us look at a guy, unless you're making All-Pro or Pro Bowls or a dominant player on the Saints, you're a first round bust. But there's a lot of gray area now with guys. They're not quite bust, but they're not great players either. There's other players who have been more impactful. And I would put Cedric Ellis in that mix.
Yeah, you know what? I'd agree with that, and I think a lot of older Saints fans remember too. Not only was Ellis a first-round pick, but he was a pretty high first-round pick, and obviously, when you're a high pick, the expectations are greater. Andrus Peat is another good example. I mean, people hate Andrus Peat. And, like to label him as one of the bigger first round busts of all time. But remember, this guy has started a lot of games. He's been a solid run blocker. His pass protection, we need not talk about at the moment. But when healthy, or especially through the middle part of his career, Andrus Peat was one of the anchors of one of the better offensive lines in the league.
Yes. And the problem is he's not a Carl Nix. He's certainly not a Jari Evans.
Right.
But he is an adequate guard who is a dominant run blocker, but a terrible pass protector. And he's injured all the time. So it's tough to have to be a defender of his, because it's like he's like that sports car you've gotten, that British sports car you got, like a Jaguar, and it's always in the shop. It's good. And when there are days where you take it out and it runs and it's a dream car, but most of the time you're spending money keeping it in the shop all day, so you hate it. So yeah, it's tough. It's tough. So the real bust are the guys that can't break the starting lineup, and are gone from the team within a couple of years. Those are the guys that I consider busts. And the Stephon Anthony's, the Jonathan Sullivans, the Sean Knights, those were the real busts. And it's tough, because we should be getting better at drafting. And outside of the 2017 draft class, we really have not had that just a home run kind of draft again. You got some good guys in the draft these past couple of years. You got a good guy. You got Cesar Ruiz, who has turned out to be a better player. You got Paulson Adebo, who's turned out to be a good player. He had a sophomore slump, but he is a good player. This year will make or break him. But then you end up with Adam Trotman, who is like a poor man's Josh Hill, and Josh Hill was an undrafted guy. He'll never be more than a number 2 tight end. You get a Peyton Turner who can't stay healthy, and when he is healthy, he's an impact player. He's not even starting. So it's tough. We have not had good draft classes.
No, not at all. And the Saints need to hit on all of their draft picks this year if they have even any shot at competing in the NFC South, let alone being a legitimate playoff contender. And you're right, it has been frustrating, because since 2017, you named a couple.
Oh, Bob dropped off. Bob, you still there? Shoot, Bob's having all kinds of trouble. But anyway, echoing the point, you need to hit on the draft classes. You don't need to hit a 2017 style draft class, but you need to hit something close to that. You need to hit on your first round pick, your second and third round picks. I'd like to get hit on the fourth round pick. The fifth, I'm okay with it. It's a bit of a gamble, but you need to get at least 3 starters out of this draft class. 4 would be great, but you need 3 starters. If you don't get your 3 starters, you really start falling behind, because this roster was old. One of the oldest in the NFL right now. It has a lot of holes in it. Coaching comments aside, this roster is not a quarterback or a head coach away from making a run, even as bad as the NFC is. They have a lot of needs they need to get filled, and you need to get smarter with the cap, and you need to have good young players, cheap players, starting to fill some of these veteran spots. And I think that's where we failed in the draft. I think we failed in the 2020 draft. I think we failed in the 2018 draft, even the 2019 draft to an extent, just because we haven't gotten enough players or enough depth to really turn this team around. Um, you only got two players out of this draft class. You know, you need a little more than that. You need to get three or four. You got Jackson, not Jackson, sorry, Taylor, the cornerback, and you hit on Chris Olave. Penning is out there as a question mark, and I have him a question mark only just because he hasn't started. But Penning is an issue too. Bob, are you back? Okay. I know Bob's been having trouble audio and now video, hearing me, and now he's having trouble even talking.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Okay.
Okay.
Did you hear anything I just said, or were you trying to get back in?
No. I heard everything. I didn't realize until just now that you couldn't hear me. But yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, yeah, the failures of those drafts that you mentioned, they have created the holes in the roster. You have deficiencies at wide receiver because you missed on Traquan Smith. You have deficiencies at tight end, because you missed on Adam Troutman, and it's just. Yeah, it is great that the Saints have had such good luck with undrafted guys, Juwan Johnson, Carl Granderson, Rashid Shaheed, et cetera. But you can't count on that to make your roster because it's not a long-term plan for any success whatsoever. They have 4 picks as it stands right now. They have 4 picks in the top 120 selections. That sets you up for a pretty productive draft if you're smart.
Yes, exactly. And that's why I'm leaning more towards getting Carr or Garoppolo and getting those other needs filled in those first 4 picks, getting a defensive tackle, getting a tight end, getting a physical receiver, a big-bodied receiver, getting a running back. I want to see a power running back, on this team because I felt that Alvin Kamara was wasted a lot because they couldn't run the football. They were trying to use him as a power back, and he's really, I don't want to say a third down back because that's not accurate. That's not the way the NFL is played anymore, but he's a guy that is better as a pass catcher, is better breaking to the outside. You've got to be able to get somebody who can run inside and somebody who can push that pile. We talked about the Super Bowl. How many plays, 4th and 2, 4th and 1, that big offensive line for the Eagles were able to shove the Chiefs back and get that short yardage with a quarterback sneak, build up. But I see his name a lot, Charbonnet from UCLA. My son, who is on here, I know what tight end he likes on this team, the Georgia kid. So those are all guys, the Texas kid I like, the Texas running back I like. So there's a lot of guys in there I'd like to see. So we've been focusing on the quarterback so much that we really need to start looking at those other positions. And free agency and getting a quarterback and a veteran quarterback is going to determine how they approach the draft. So, Boston Scott, it's funny about Boston Scott. Bob, I don't know how you feel about him, but it's almost like he really didn't have a place on this roster. You end up getting Devontae Harris right after that. He wasn't going to be a running back because of Kamara, but I just don't think he had a spot on this team. The Eagles have a spot for him.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. And I like Boston Scott coming out of Louisiana Tech. So I was glad to see them pick him up. But you're right. I mean, just Boston's skill set did not fit in with what the Saints needed. He wasn't going to be your between the tackles runner like Mark Ingram and then Latavius Murray for a couple of years. He wasn't going to take the spot of Alvin Kamara. Because he had to. What he does best is what Alvin Kamara does best, but Kamara does it better. So you're not going to sit number 41, to play Boston Scott. So it was. I'm not going to say a wasted draft pick because when you get to the 5th, 6th, 7th rounds, you take the best player on your board regardless of position. So I don't fault the Saints for doing that. It's just you also can't fault the Saints because Boston Scott didn't work out here because he just, like you said, he just didn't have a fit on the roster.
Yeah, I mean, kick returners, because that's what he would have been for the Saints. Kick returners, Peyton really liked speed and really liked receivers to be kick returners.
Mm-hmm.
He could use multiple ways. So yeah, it's tough. Yeah, you're right. But the one I'm thinking about is the first round predicted guy. Bijan Johnson, I think is who that is. I don't remember his name off the top of my head. That's the one I keep seeing falling into the Saints at 29.
Yeah.
And I just I wouldn't be upset with a first round running back. I wouldn't be upset with a first round tight end. I wouldn't be upset with a first round defensive tackle. Last year, I loved the Georgia defensive tackle. I would not have been upset they picked him over Penning. So to me, the Saints have to get better in the trenches, especially in the middle. So I'm looking at guards or tackles that can be kicked over to guard, and I'm looking at defensive tackles. So, that's why I'm like, look, I know Carr's not great. I know Garoppolo's not great. He gets hurt a lot, but I'm willing to take a shot on one of those veteran guys to fill in the other holes in my roster and then go trolling for a quarterback in the draft somewhere. Look at the next few classes of quarterbacks, and that's where I'm going to be looking at. I'm not looking at getting a guy and trying to build a team around him. I want to build the team first. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, 100%. Especially when you look at Demario Davis is 34 years old, Cam Jordan is 34 years old. Alvin Kamara, who I still think is going to be dangled as trade bait. But if he's still on the roster, we know the shelf life for an NFL running back is not long. So you have to figure out, if you can, you have to figure out a way to win now. Derek Carr, Jimmy Garoppolo, they have been winners in this league in the right teams. So if you get a guy like that, I completely agree. Then at that point, you go for you fill the draft and your other money in free agency with guys that are going to be plug and play difference makers right now. You mentioned defensive tackle. I can't underestimate how much of a need this is for that team. A big physical receiver. I love Jawan Johnson, but they need another or a bigger difference maker at tight end. You mentioned the trenches. I think that if they believe that Trevor Penning is the guy at tackle, I think you can move James. You can cut Andrus Peat, save yourself a little bit of cap space, and move James Hurst inside, and still have an effective offensive line. But Hurst is getting up there in years too. You reached a contract extension with Eric McCoy, but Cesar Ruiz, they're going to have to make a contract decision on Cesar Ruiz in the next year too. So Saints fans, don't start pulling your hair out yet. Do not be surprised if the Saints draft another offensive lineman in the first round, because they did get whipped around in the trenches on both sides of the ball in several games this year. they couldn't run block. They couldn't dominate the line of scrimmage, with their offense. And the run defense was atrocious, specifically because of the failures of the defensive tackle spot. These two areas have to be addressed this offseason. I realize quarterback is the one everybody is pointing to. Quarterback is certainly the biggest need on this team. But if you get a guy, like Alan said, if you get a guy like Carr or Garoppolo, a guy that's proven that he can, no, neither one are elite, but they've proven that they can win with the right football teams. So at least you get that box checked off for the short-term future. And at that point, you then address your other major needs.
And that's just it. You need to have, you look at the year that Garoppolo took the 49ers to the Super Bowl, they had 3 running backs that really carried that team and a good defense. Okay. You had other weapons. You had a good tight end. You had the receiver. You had a Debo. No, I'm sorry, Debo Samuel. Sorry. You had Debo Samuel. You have weapons that you could do things with. We're still going to pull whoever the quarterback is going to be. We're still going to pull them out and put in Taysom Hill to run plays. So you know that's going to happen still. There's a lot of things that if you fix those other parts or short those other parts, you can get and we've talked about this before in the show, you can get a game manager, not a playmaker, but a game managing quarterback that you don't have to have the ball in his hands to win. You have other weapons who can win for you. He just needs to be able to get the ball to those people's hands. And I think that's where this team is going to go. Ryan, I'm afraid to tell you this, but that train is sailed or shipped off. Dennis Allen does not want Jameis Winston on this team. They're going to let him go. That was all part of this decision-making process, because if Jameis Winston would have worked in this offense and Dennis Allen would have felt like he worked in this offense, he'd be the starter, but he wasn't. And it's just that's just the way it's going to be. I don't think they're going to break Mayfield. I think Baker Mayfield is just that other option out there in case they get left at the altar by the 2 big name quarterbacks in free agency. And, and exactly, Calvin, I think an O-line would help a young QB anyway. You've got to get this O-line better to take the pressure off a young quarterback. If you want to get Anthony Richardson, if you want to bring in a Hendon Hooker, the best thing you can have for them is a good offensive line to allow them to buy time to make plays. But none of these guys are day one starters. So you still need a day one starter. And we don't know when that day will be that these young guys are ready to take over. It could be a whole season for a guy like Hooker, depending on how he bounces back from his ACL. It could be a whole season for AR-15 if they feel like he needs a year in the system to comprehend it, get the verbiage down, understand his responsibilities, work on his mechanics, all those things. So it's tough. It's tough. So, that's what happens for teams like the Bears, for the Jets, for the perennial top 10 teams that are drafting every year in the top 10. They've got so many holes. They can afford to draft a guy and let him get his ass kicked while they try to build a team around him. Really, you think about it. The Jets, you got a guy. You've already gone through Sam Darnold. You went through Zach Wilson. He's now on his way out. It's just they're going to go get a quarterback, and what's going to happen with this guy? That's all I'm trying to say with that. Bob, real quick, because we over time because of the connection issues and stuff like that. What do you have going on for the Bayou Blitz tomorrow night?
Thank you. And yeah, I do apologize again for the technical difficulties. I will work on them, hopefully get them fixed by tomorrow night. But yeah, Brendan and I are going to get together, recap the Super Bowl a little bit. Hopefully I don't have to spend as much time, talking about it, because I'd like to just move on. We'll talk about Derek Carr's options, the Saints' options for Derek Carr. A lot of the same things that we talked about tonight. I have an article on the Saints News Network coming out in the next couple of days about. I haven't decided what I'm going to title it yet, but it's basically going to be called titled Saints Six Pack. 6 comparisons from the New Orleans Saints to this year's 2 Super Bowl participants. That'll make you realize how far away this team might actually be. It's going to be a depressing article, but people are already calling me names on Facebook for my Baker Mayfield article today. So, what the hell not? It's off season.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, I know. People have their own ideas about how to build a roster, and unfortunately, they all think it's like Madden. Right. Oh, thank you, Jimmy. I don't know if you could see it, but Jimmy Gumbo says Delvin Breaux was great last week. So.
Oh, I appreciate that. I appreciate that, Jimmy. Yeah, Delvin's always great to come on. Remember, he's in the New Orleans area, so he's going to be doing a lot of charitable things. Has that football camp coming up for youth boys and girls. Love to see him get girls involved too. With his athletic camps that he's going to be doing. And we're going to be having. I know we're going to have Delvin back on. Going to try to get him on with Alan and I here at Under the Dome too. He's real excited to make his rounds through the media circuit. And we're going to have other guests on both Under the Dome and Bayou Blitz through the off season. Right now, we're waiting for a quiet week for the New Orleans in the Saints news. So that way we can get some of these former players on.
You and I really haven't even talked about Sean Payton being with the Broncos either. So,
right.
I mean, because you were out the week that the deal went down, and of course, Super Bowl week, everything else. So we're gonna have to sit and talk about that one time. So, Calvin, I'm gonna have to mute you when Delvin's on here. I can't have you trashing our guests. And I'd love to get Everett on, of course, and talk about those late '90s teams. But in the meantime, hey, everybody, I appreciate y'all taking time out for your Valentine's weekend or Valentine's Day. Next week is Mardi Gras. I will not be here next week. I will be flying back from Denver. I go out of town for Mardi Gras because I just do. I'm going to go see my sister-in-law and my nephew and nieces over the weekend. So we'll be flying. We're leaving on Saturday, coming back on Tuesday. So I will not be landing in New Orleans until like 11 o'clock Central Time Tuesday night. So I will be either in the airport or in the air at the time this show comes on. So we're going to skip next week, and we will be back 2 weeks from now. Hopefully, we either have a decision on Carr, or we're on to something else, or it's just a quiet week for the Saints. We talk about the new coaches they have. Michael might end up with Peyton. I don't know, so you have a whole bunch of stuff going on. So, happy birthday, Calvin. Today's his birthday.
Happy birthday, Calvin.
You're a Valentine's baby. And last comment of the night, a shout out to all the maids who have to clean and change the sheets February 15th at the hotel. In the meantime, thank you guys for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Under the Dome. Good night, everybody.